Well, hi folks. We're coming to you here from the poultry division of the home office. We're talking about teaching and learning at a distance today, and it's very apropos to our current situation right now, right? So I'd like to start with someone who tackles that straight on, Dr. Janice Waldron. She's an associate professor of music education at the University of Windsor, Ontario, in Canada. Lots of distances up there. So online teaching, maybe, important. Anyhow, she's a prolific scholar in the field of music education, and her work's often cited by other scholars in this new area of informal learning and online learning of various kinds. And she's the co-editor of the Oxford Handbook of Social Media and Music Learning, so she kind of knows what she's talking about, I think. So she introduces her main research subject. I think she has a pretty clear and straightforward research design. She's interested in teaching and learning and how they happen online in informal ways, often through communities of practice on social media, blogs, YouTube, and various sorts of participatory websites. So she talks about assumptions. She has assumptions about formal learning, what usually takes place in music education, sometimes in universities, like the one where we usually spend our time. And Waldron says, as music educators, we have much to learn by examining successful music communities of practice that lie outside of our regular scope of school music and school music genres. This includes teaching musical skills necessary to be active participants in other genres besides those perpetuated by school music. Neither have we fully understood or utilized the power of the internet in facilitating informal music learning in online communities. I think it's interesting how she then just heads out to Banjo Hangout. It's more of a social network, I would think. But really, reading the article, there's a lot there on that site about learning, and that helps people to learn and supports them as they learn, which really seems interesting. If you search there, you can find her post that she used to seek her participants. This is kind of similar to what we're going to be doing this semester as we seek people to participate in the survey that we'll be doing. Now I have a question for y'all here. What other ways could you imagine to get the kind of information she's seeking about the ways that informal music learning happen online? Think, how would it be different if to do just a survey, or to just do a set of interviews, or I don't know, some other way to get this information? It's important to think when you're involved in research like we're doing in our class, and when you're reading people's research, to think about what is the most appropriate way to carry out our project. And maybe there are some things that you'll think about differently based on that kind of design assessment. Now, here's a question that Janice Waldron asks elsewhere in a different article, a different project. How does belonging to an online music community facilitate informal music learning? And this is something that her work brings up, I think. The idea that we don't just learn on our own, or it's not just a collection of data that we bring in. We learn in community. We learn from people, and that matters. How the learning matters, the context of the learning matters. I think that's one of the things that it's important to take away from her work. Also, this question, why is it important to have informal music learning? Why is it important to have some areas where people can learn about music and music scenes and how to do music that aren't all formalized? I think that's an interesting question, especially for us, people like me who work in institutionalized music settings. Now, let's pause for a second and think about class content. This is our class content check-in. How do the writers, the people we've read and thought about so far in the class, how might we think about their work in regard to what Waldron is thinking about and writing about? So this is one of the things that I'm requiring you to do in this class. You integrate class content and use it as you continue through the class and your projects. So let's think back. Filene, WWFBGA. What would Filene be grumpy about? Is one acronym we might deploy here. he might be okay with online learning. It offers many perspectives on a tune, sound, style. You can find 20 different whiskeys before breakfast if you want to, up online somewhere. And also, I think if you're in an informal setting online, you're probably going to see music in motion. There are a lot of recordings that fix the culture at any one time. But as a whole, it shows culture in motion, so it's not fixed and stationary, as he was kind of griping about. So, interesting thing there, right? I'd be curious if y'all have some other thoughts, things that Filene might be grumpy about. Peterson, I can think of... I was thinking about relics recently. Maybe you could... There are a lot of relics that are displayed and shared and taught through online and informal social media. And there are a lot of new contexts in which things could be credible or not credible. Something in there, maybe? Cantwell, here you go. What rooms in the Bluegrass house that we might be imagining, or the BLUE house, the house where you live in the neighborhood, would be affected by the pervasiveness of social media or of hyperlink sensibilities? You know, is the attic different because of social media? Is the front porch or the back porch? What about in COVID time? How is the house different, right? Another question that I think is a good one to think about as you consider critically all these readings we're going through is there something that Waldron misses out on? One thing that I don't think her understanding of the nuances, especially of the difference between bluegrass and old time, are really there a lot. I think there might be some more awareness of those genre differences. Anyhow, great. I think it's a really thought-provoking piece, and it brings us to think about some areas we might not have thought about otherwise. Now, question break. We would be discussing this in person if we were all in the same room. So find someone to talk about this with. All right, that's your dinner time discussion or sometime. So raise your hand. Who teaches in our group? Are you raising it? Connor, Caitlin, somebody. All right, Bueller, right? Now, how do you respond to this week's readings as a teacher? Previous class discussions on this topic included some thoughts like someone said, I learned how to play bluegrass by listening as well as by music notation. Do you think that this style of training, teaching that we read about this week is better for beginner musicians? How does the effectiveness of in-person or online learning change based on where someone is in their process of mastery, I guess? And someone else was thinking, is online learning too easy? Is online research too easy? Interesting question. There's things that are difficult and easy to do in each of those modalities, I guess, right? Now, just a quick rundown, and this is an area where y'all can probably help me out. I just made a list and was thinking about the different ways that people teach and learn online. So you have synchronous online teaching through video chat methods, Skype or something else like that. You have interaction, you have real-time feedback, but the teacher can't really get a sense of the student's ability to tune in. You know, you can't really play online. There may be some things that are coming out that allow folks to do that, but latency is always an issue. So, also time is usually limited because Skype lessons are usually pretty tightly scheduled and stacked. Now you have something like the Artist Works Academy, which has an interesting model. It's asynchronous, but in some ways you get a lot of attention. The teacher can look at what you're doing and give you feedback on the videos that you send asynchronously. And then also you have recordings that you can listen to over and over and look at carefully. So there's some benefit to that feedback that comes to you. I think it maximizes the asynchronous quality in a good way. And YouTube and other instructional videos have that same quality. You can pull stuff and look at it all you want. That's one thing that came up in the Frisch reading. The Jerry Milnes, the teacher, was kind of, he seemed irritated, grumpy, maybe, about how all the students were wanting to get and record so they could have all these recordings. So that's something that you can do all you want on YouTube. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of these different modes of teaching? I'm sure we're all in the thick of that in various ways. One thing I'm trying to do is to have in my courses online, teaching like this kind of class, I try to have as many different kinds of modes of teaching as I can manage. It's to make it kind of biblical, especially in the Old Testament. Hebrew poetry and prose tends to say things like 3 different ways. So I try and do that and make sure that we have media stuff to respond to, discussion verbally, discussion written. I try and make sure that we're covering bases. And I wonder if that's something that is possible if you're just offering someone individual lessons online. It would take a lot of work to do all that. Anyhow, things to think about. Before we go away, I want to talk at least some about Frisch. I think this article covers a lot of ground. The part that I think is the most valuable is his focus on Jerry Milnes and his teaching. Jerry Milnes seems to argue, as Waldron does, that the way we learn matters. How we get information matters. So first, an introduction. Michael Frisch is a professor and researcher in American Studies at SUNY Buffalo. His research interests include oral and public history, urban and social history, deindustrialization and responses to it, and community-based documentation projects. So interesting. I think music is not really his main thing, but I think he had some interesting insights, perhaps because of his outsider status in his academic work. And I think he provides a really vivid sense of the tensions in Jerry Milnes's workshop classroom and the anxiety of the students who want to make sure they capture the best and most obscure tunes and variations with their audio recorders. Milnes, in Frisch's account, seems to shrug off this effort to have, and he wants to teach these fiddlers how to fish, right? Not to just give them a fish. I think he's pushing them to do the more difficult learning, and also the kind of learning that they would not be able to do on their own with a recording. So I think I sense in Frisch's account a careful structuring of a classroom and of an in-person learning experience that maximizes the resources and possibilities that you have when you are physically there with people. So reading through that again kind of made me think about that in our current situation and miss it. The times are strange. I hope y'all are doing all right, and I hope you'll be in touch with me. We've been kind of slow here, ramping up in the course. Things are going to start to get thicker, so I'm going to be throwing a lot more stuff, especially ramping up to the project. So stay tuned and be in touch as things continue over the coming weeks through the semester. Take care, y'all. If you want to come see the chickens, let me know. You can come over and say hi to them anytime. They're pretty friendly. Bye, y'all.